Yo, what's going on, guys? Trey back again here, bringing another video. This one's going to be doing an experiment, so to speak. A new kind of video I have kind of been playing with in my mind of, of doing for some fighters. And what it's going to be is basically a look on their career from my perspective, giving my thoughts on the fighter, when I think that they're at their physical prime, their physical peak, when I think they're at their best, kind of, reflecting on some of their fights and talking about it. There's a lot of career highlights out there where you can go back and you can watch, a fighter and, see all their knockouts and stuff like that. But this is going to be my take on it, and just me basically talking about a fighter, reviewing them, but in a certain way, just to kind of review their career overall and, reflect on how they are. Obviously, this will be done probably near the end of a lot of fighters' careers. So when I was thinking, which fighter should I start with? It was really a no-brainer to me at this time. The fighter definitely that deserves one of these types of videos the most, especially at this point in his career, is got to be Fedor, the Last Emperor. So we're going to do the Last Emperor first, and then I may decide to do other fighters if I like how this video turns out, and of course if you guys like how this video turns out and you want to see me reflect on some other guys' careers and do a career in review. So let's get started with Fedor Emelianenko. Let's start from the beginning. So the beginning of Fedor's career, he started fighting for the Rings organization. Now, this was way back in the dark ages of MMA, and what I mean by that is just like, there was almost like no viewership, you know what I mean, like of Rings and this kind of stuff. Like, guys would go watch the fight who lived, in the city maybe, but it wasn't televised on TV most of the time. Most organizations weren't televised except for Pride and the UFC. All the other ones, you know what I mean, like they didn't really have pay-per-views, most of them. If they did, it was like shown once, and the quality was, questionable. The production wasn't the greatest. So, this was the kind of time when Fedor was really starting. So around 2000, the year 2000 was really when he had, his first couple fights. So my first exposure to Fedor, the very first time I saw him fight live was in Pride. Okay, I saw him when I was in grade 9. Grade 8 or grade 9, first year high school or last year elementary school. I can't remember exactly which. I turned on the TV, and I was, I had satellite at the time, pirated satellite, and so I used to watch all the pay-per-views, and of course I got so excited when Pride was coming on, because man, when Pride had the pay-per-views, you knew you were in for a treat. When you turned on to watch a Pride pay-per-view and you bought it or you were watching it, you got to see some amazing fights, man. They put on some fantastic shows. It wasn't like now with the UFC where there might be one fight you're looking to see, or two or three. Three maximum in the UFC, and that's at a good pay-per-view. A lot of times, a lot of UFC pay-per-views, I'm only interested in maybe two of the fights, maybe sometimes even just one. And there are occasions where I'm not interested in any fights on the UFC card. This happens a lot, especially lately this year where they got the lighter weight classes and more fighters. Sometimes I'm just not as interested to see what's going on. Pride was never like that. In Pride there was always like, all the heavyweights were fighting, like it was amazing. So many top guys were fighting. You get to see Big Nog, and they fought with such frequency. They fought 3 or 4 times a year. Like I'm looking here, in 2004, Fedor fought 5 times in 1 year. 5 times in 2004. And that's a top heavyweight competition, man. So, I mean, they had some amazing cards. Their tournaments and everything, absolutely crazy. So, yeah, the first time I saw him fight was against Heath Herring, okay? And I knew who Heath Herring was because I had seen him fight a couple times before against some other guys, and I knew he was pretty good. Unfortunately for Heath Herring, he was one of the top guys, but he just wasn't quite good enough to mess with the guys at the very top. You know what I mean? He would fight, Fedor and, Big Nog and these other guys, and he would do pretty well, but he was just always just a little bit, and then eventually at the end of his career fighting Brock Lesnar, just a little bit, below those top guys. And he's tough, and he doesn't quit. And I remember Heath Herring. That was one of the worst beatings I've ever seen in my entire life. You guys can go look this up. Fedor against Heath Herring. Unbelievable. I remember that Fedor pounded him, hit him so hard, he split him like right on his face, like in a weird spot, like with his cheekbone. You know, I think he hit him with a right hook in that fight, and man, he split his cheekbone open and I was like, who is this guy? This guy's crazy, because the way Fedor fights, his boxing and everything, and the way he throws punches and his sambo is so different from what we're used to seeing. You know, we're used to seeing a lot of boxers and, you know, like MMA fighters. They throw, the majority of their punches are going to be straight punches, you know, a lot of jabs and then some hooks. But Fedor doesn't mess around, man. When he comes and he comes at these guys swinging, he comes to hurt them. You know what I mean? Like he throws some of the heaviest punches in MMA history for sure, if not the heaviest. When he throws his hooks and everything, just batters guys, man. It was just absolutely crazy to watch him back in Pride and you know, in his prime when he was smashing these guys. So yeah, so that was the first time I saw Fedor fight, was against Heath Herring. Couldn't wait to see him fight after that. Thought, like, who is this guy? This guy's crazy, man. So then he fought against, right after that, fought against Big Nog, and that was for the Pride Heavyweight Championship. And he won. He beat Big Nog by unanimous decision, where he pretty much just, he smoked him. This was the fight where he took Big Nog down a couple times, and he just put on some massive ground and pound. I mean, different kind of ground and pound that we've ever seen before. You know, throwing through the guard, you know, hooks, diving in with punches, you know, diving in with right hooks and left hooks, and just, man, soccer kicks. And my goodness, man, it was something crazy to watch Fedor back then when he was at his prime. So that was right around where I think he probably was close to his best. I think he was still, you know, learning a bit at that time. So that was in 2003 with Big Nog. I think a couple years after that, let's see who else he fought after that. So Fujita, I remember the fight with that. That was where Fujita almost KO'd Fedor. He came in and I think Fujita hit him with a overhand right, and Fedor was out on his feet. And you know, you can see this on YouTube. He's out on his feet, but you know, Fedor doesn't quit ever. You know, and he doesn't quit unless it's over. You know what I mean? Like with that triangle, but. You know, like getting knocked out for Fedor, like even against Bigfoot Silva, you know, even though his face was like, you know, looked like a zombie from Resident Evil, he still came out to answer the bell for the third round. You know, there's no quit in Fedor. You know, we all know that. So, yeah, Fujita had rocked him with a right hook, and Fedor just, like, he ate it, and he was out on his feet. His feet were wobbly. He was all wobbly all over the place. He looked like it looked like the fight was over. And all he did was, like, Fedor grabs onto Fujita and just holds onto him, you know, as for dear life, just to be like, you know, because if you're holding a guy, they can't really punch you, or at least they can't tee off on you. So he gets a hold of him, and then, you know, Fedor comes back from it, hits him with, I think it was a left kick, a couple punches, down he goes, and then chokes him out with a rear naked choke. Amazing come from behind victory from Fedor. And, you know, that's part of the style, or that's part of the thing that makes Fedor so amazing, is that his fighting style, I mean, Fedor comes to throw down, man. When he comes after guys, you know, he doesn't throw anything light. He's throwing right hooks, left hooks, going crazy. You know what I mean? That's the way he fights. And in this situation, he got caught with a good punch, and he still was just, you know, still kept coming forward, grabbed him, even though he was totally almost out on his feet. Still was able to beat Fujita. That was almost a fluky KO. You know, a lot of guys would have gone down from that, but not Fedor, no question about it. So then he fought Gary Goodridge, and this is the one where he soccer kicked Gary Goodridge, and Goodridge is on the ground just like this, and Fedor is soccer kicking him in the head, because remember back in Pride, you could kick guys to the head. The UFC, they don't allow that, but that was unbelievable too. And then he fought Nagata. I don't remember that one. That was a TKO. Mark Coleman, his fights with Mark Coleman, man, yeah. So this one with Coleman, this was where Coleman was roided out of his mind. And then after this, he fought Randleman. So talking about roids. Okay, so these guys in Japan, Coleman and Randleman, it is no secret that these guys were juicing out of their minds in Pride. Juicing out of their minds. You know, and these were big wrestlers, you know, big, huge wrestlers, like, you know, with close to the strength of someone like a Brock Lesnar, these kind of guys, because they're on juice, you know what I mean? Even if they're not physically as big, when you're taking juice like that, your muscles become so much denser, you know, and Randleman was a huge guy. I mean, the thighs on Randleman, you know, they're like this big. And anyway, so for Coleman was able to out-wrestle Fedor, and that was where Fedor pulled off that armbar, man. Beautiful armbar. You can see it in slow motion on YouTube. He, you know, I think he trapped the leg, grabbed the arm, moved his hips around so fast. Coleman, man, he had no, he couldn't stop it. He just, he had to tap. And then after, he got so pissed off. I think this is the one where you get to see him in the back afterwards, or maybe it's the next one. And he's just going crazy, and he's so mad and stuff, because he was doing well against Fedor, and that happens. Then Randleman again, very close to beating Fedor. He did the belly to back suplex and slammed him on his head, spiked him on the back of his head, right over and spiked him down. Unbelievable. They got airtime too, because like I said, Coleman's thighs are like this big and he's juicing. So he jumps. He literally jumped when he did this belly to back suplex, slammed Fedor right on his head. Just a brutal slam. And you'd think that it looked like he almost killed him. It really did. It looked like he's like, oh my God, it's going to be the first death in Pride. Fedor's dead. Coleman just or Randleman just slammed him right on his neck. And he rolls with it, and then he turns around, and obviously that took a lot of Randleman's strength, to do that. Lift the 230, 40-pound man over your head like that, jump up in the air and slam on his head. So he was tired, and then Fedor takes, comes back and lands a Kimura on him. Absolutely crazy. So, and then he beat Ogawa. I don't remember that one. And then here was the one with Big Nog, the rematch, where it was an accidental headbutt. They both headbutted each other, and it was a no contest. And this was part of the heavyweight Grand Prix. And then the final, they had the rematch, and yet again, Big Nog fought Fedor, and again, Fedor took this one, unanimous decision. So Big Nog 3 times against Fedor. Big Nog improved quite a bit, and this was a closer fight, I think, than was the first time, if I remember correctly. But just, Fedor is just a beast, man, especially at that time. And I was going to say earlier that I would mention when they got at their peak. So here it comes right here. So then he beats Kosaka, and at this point, Fedor's 22-1 with his 1 loss from the doctor stoppage via a cut. And then he fought Mirko Krokop. So I think that right around here, for anywhere between here and the next year, is when I believe Fedor was at his absolute prime, absolute physical prime, August 2005. When he fought Krokop, Krokop being a kickboxer, having a kickboxer background, everybody kind of thought that maybe he would be a bad matchup for Fedor. This was a huge fight. One of the biggest fights in the history of the sport, no question about it, in Pride. Fireworks and all that jazz, just a huge matchup, Krokop against, because Krokop also had knocked out Fedor's brother, Alexander Emelianenko, with a head kick. And there's a footage, and you can still see this online too, where Fedor's in the back and he's watching it. And he's kind of just pissed off. I don't know if that was a promotional thing or if that was real. It looks pretty real, but you never know. It could be promotion from Pride, and he's just like, Fedor gets mad. And you never see Fedor get angry or anything. And he's like, I think he calls him a bastard or something like that against Krokop. And this was right before, and then they end up fighting. And so that was a decision victory, but there was some, that was awesome. Fedor beat him in his own game, outstruck him. A couple takedowns. I remember one in particular where Fedor grabbed his leg and threw him into the ropes, or pretty much almost out of the ring, and you could just see it when they went down, boom, right into the ropes, and Krokop was just like, holy shit, what's going on here? This guy is smoking me in my own game. So at that point, he was 23-1. Then after that, he had a couple other matches against some guys I'm not familiar with. Martins, I don't remember this guy. Wagner Martins, I don't remember him. Coleman again, a rematch, and yet again he submitted him with the armbar. Mark Hunt, he got a Kimura on him. Mark Hunt is like, Mark Hunt's never really been that good. He's always kind of lost when it came to bigger fights. Even in the UFC, he's not done well. And here's when Pride pretty much, that was a Pride shockwave, and here's when Pride, ended basically. So Fedor was 26-1. Pride was done. They called it quits. I think they sold it to the UFC. I'm pretty sure they did. The UFC promised they were going to continue Pride. They were like, oh yeah, we're going to continue it. We're going to continue it. They never continued it. They just folded it in, and took some of the talent. Eventually, most of the talent came over, but a lot of the guys just kind of went nowhere. They just fought in like dreams, stuff like this. But initially, so Pride ended. Initially, the UFC was going to take or continue it. They didn't. Fedor, that was when Fedor kind of was just like kind of in limbo, so to speak. He fought a Bodog against Matt Lindland, which was a fight that, he did win by submission, but it was a questionable fight. And, this was right around the time I think that Fedor started to decline, right around here. This was 2006, 2007. After Lindland, he fought Hongman Choi, and that was at, what promotion was that? I can't pronounce it. Yaranoka? I don't remember that. But anyway, yeah, so he fought Hongman Choi, and that was where he armbarred Hongman Choi, and that was pretty crazy too. It was like a freak show fight, but I mean, still, Hongman Choi was huge. It was interesting, and I think that still Hongman Choi. I mean, I don't know what he weighs, but if you're a guy who weighs like 230 pounds and you're fighting Hongman Choi and you beat him, I gotta say that that's pretty impressive, no question about it. After that, we got to see a huge matchup, which was Affliction. I remember I loved Affliction, man. When Affliction came on, I was so pumped, so excited for Affliction. I absolutely loved it. They had the ring instead of a cage. I loved Affliction. Tim Sylvia. This was a quick one. We were all like so amped for it. Fedor beat him in like, what was it, like 15 seconds or something? No, 36 seconds he beat him in. Unbelievable. Tim Sylvia was the champion for years in the UFC, thought of as one of the best in the world, and Fedor made him look like he was nothing. And this was where the Fedor mystique rose to all-time high when people like he was already thought of as #1, but when he smoked Tim Sylvia like that, that represented pride in the UFC. You know what I mean? The champion that the UFC had, Tim Sylvia, was supposed to be the best guy. And when Randy Couture beat him, everybody was like, "Whoa, this is so awesome." But when Fedor fought him, and he was the pride champ, he made him look like he was nothing. You know what I mean? He really did. Like 36 seconds just beat the snot out of him. I don't think Sylvia landed one punch. Actually, I'm pretty sure he didn't. He just got bum rushed and just destroyed by Fedor. That was just impressive in Affliction. So moving on from there, Andrei Arlovsky. This was one of the best knockouts of all time. And I think Fedor, out of any fighter out there, I think he holds probably the 2 best knockouts ever. These next 2 fights, knocking out Andrei Arlovsky and Brett Rogers. Those were 2 of the craziest knockouts. Andrei Arlovsky was doing well in the fight, had him up against the ropes, goes to throw a flying, I believe it was a right knee? Flying right knee, I'm pretty sure. Fedor telegraphs it and hits him with a right hook from hell. And this was such a crazy knockout because it was midair when Arlovsky got knocked out. He was unconscious in midair. Before he hit the ground, he was out. So he jumps up, gets hit with the right hook, his face just goes like this, and you see his eyes just close. And then when he lands, he's unconscious, so he can't brace himself. So he kind of goes up, gets hit with the right hook, does one of these, and just goes down. He doesn't brace himself with his hands or anything, just flat out on the ground. Totally unconscious in midair. Unbelievable knockout. Probably one of the best ever. The next one, I think, is probably the best knockout of all time. Brett Rogers, so a big guy, 2009. This is when Fedor, I believe, is starting to decline, but his fighting spirit is definitely still there. He was having trouble dealing with Brett Rogers' size. Brett Rogers, using his weight and his size, his big punches, was able to get Fedor down, was landing some good ground and pound on him. And everybody was like, holy shit, Brett Rogers might beat Fedor. This is crazy. And this was one of the best fights ever. If I had to pick maybe my favorite fight in the history of mixed martial arts, I think this is it. I think this really is, because when you look at a fight and what you want to see from a fight, Brett Rogers against Fedor was amazing, man. Fedor in the first round, they're just throwing, they're going crazy on each other. Brett Rogers doing really well, surprising everybody. They start to get tired, and then it was the second round. They come out, they're still throwing heavy, throwing hard. Fedor kind of jumps up a couple times and uses just that quick, punching power of his, and boom, knocks Brett Rogers out with one of the most beautiful, clean knockouts you've ever seen, man. Like Quentin Rampage Jackson, some really nice knockouts, but I don't think any of his knockouts compare to this, even against like Vanderlei and Chuck. Rashad Evans against Chuck, like those are good knockouts, but this was something crazy. There's a graphic I've seen of guys where they took Brett Rogers' head, and when Fedor hits it, it's a gift. His head flies off and and hits the camera. You can find that one too on Google. Just crazy, man. So that was, like I said, he was on the decline, but at the same time, he had 2 of the best knockouts ever. So it didn't really hurt Fedor's name too much because he had trouble with Brett Rogers a little bit, but not too much. But yeah, I mean, just those were two of the coolest ever. Now here's where Fedor really started to go downhill. Alistair Overeem challenged Fedor to fight here, and M1 Global didn't make the fight happen. They just wouldn't. That's all there is to it. He ended up fighting Fabricio Werdum instead, and he ended up, you know, this was the most shocking upset in the history of mixed martial arts. Fabricio Werdum lands a triangle choke slash armbar on Fedor, and Fedor is forced to tap. Just crazy. I remember watching this. I had to pinch myself. I couldn't believe it. You know, I was getting ready. I was so amped to see Fedor just put a smackdown on Werdum and just beat the snot out of him, because that's what Fedor does. And it just, like, you know, it was just crazy. The first round, 1 minute and 9 seconds. I remember the crowd was just dead silent. Like, after this happened, the crowd was just like what? Like, what happened? Fedor lost? Like, really? It just seemed unreal. I mean, he was 31-1 at that point. Like, you know, with that one loss being a doctor stoppage. So really, he had never lost up to that point. In over 30 fights, he had never lost. I mean, it was just earth-shattering to see Werdum get that triangle on him. I just couldn't believe it. And I know that the rest of you guys do, I'm sure. When you saw Werdum land that triangle, it was like your jaw just hit the floor. You know, like, I think I have a video on my first channel, Trevor Harris 881, talking about, you know, what, like, right after I saw it, I filmed the video, and I was just like, you know, this was when I was first getting started on YouTube. I was just like, holy shit, you know, I couldn't believe it. Most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. I think one of the most surprising things. I was just like, wow, really? You know, because you never see the guy lose. It was so weird. You know what I mean? To see it like that, you just didn't expect. You didn't see it coming. You're like, what? Really? Like, you know, there was guys talking about. I think there was guys like saying the fight was fixed and all this stuff, and I was just like, I couldn't believe it. And I think too here, this is where Strikeforce started to get in trouble. Now that's a topic for another video, because obviously Zuf owns Strikeforce now. But I think Strikeforce, they banked a lot of money on Fedor, and unfortunately for them, it didn't work out. You know, he won his first fight against Rogers. That was huge. But then losing to Werdum like that, you know, it just destroyed Strikeforce, you know. And then in the tournament, the next fight, losing to Bigfoot Silva by the doctor stoppage, it ruined the whole tournament for them. You know, that was going to be their big money maker, where they could make tons of money from that tournament. Biggest tournament in mixed martial arts since Pride, maybe in history. And, you know, Fedor got knocked out in the first round. So it was clear at that point to me, and I'm sure to many other guys, that this is the beginning of the end for Fedor. You know, this is the time when he's starting to get a little slower. He's starting to lose it. You know, he's probably going to have to retire soon. It's just that this is the point when that's going to happen. So it's unfortunate, but that's how it goes. After that, of course, losing to Dan Henderson, that for me was like, okay, that's it. Since then, he came back and he's beat Jeff Munson, beaten Ishii, so he's 33-4. But I think everybody kind of knows that he's probably not going to go to the UFC. It's probably not going to happen. We don't know how many more fights he's going to have. I hope he has some more, because I love watching Fedor fight. But I think the end is probably near. So that's the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I think Fedor was probably at his best right around the time just before Pride capsized and the UFC bought them out. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please let me know, because like I said, it's sort of like an experiment. I don't know if people are really going to like this style of video, but from time to time, I want to try different things and see what people think. So let me know what you guys think of the video. If you enjoyed it, look back at Fedor Emelianenko's career. Probably the greatest mixed martial arts fighter of all time, depending on how Anderson Silva does in the next 2 years. I still got him at #1 right now, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know if anything can really touch Fedor's legacy, you know, going like 30 fights, 31 fights without losing. It's unprecedented. It's totally unprecedented, and especially at heavyweight, it's completely unbelievable. It's a shame that MMA didn't get big when Fedor was big, and a lot of people just don't know Fedor. You know what I mean? A lot of MMA fans now, they don't know who Fedor is. They don't know, you know what I mean? Like, they miss so much, and I implore anybody who hasn't seen his fights to go back and watch his career highlights. Man, probably the best career. I mean, he went from just like an average guy in Russia, probably poor, to the highest paid mixed martial artist of all time. More than Brock Lesnar, even higher than Brock Lesnar. The highest paid mixed martial artist we've ever seen. Fedor Emelianenko, the greatest. Later, guys. Peace.